Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask Dr. Michaels specifically, has he been following wind in Texas? Because the reason why I wanted to ask you specifically about that is because in Texas, we have produced about 8,000 to 9,000 jobs directly related to the wind industry. I've actually visited some of the wind farms in Texas, and the advancements that have been made have been, quite impressive. And you stated earlier that you didn't think that we were really gaining very much in advancement as far as wind is concerned.
By advancement, I meant improvements in the technology, not expansion in the amount of installations outstanding. But in Texas, you have what is in many ways a good example of why we should think twice about the production tax credit in the seeming growth of the industry. The transmission lines that link the windy regions of Texas with the consuming regions of Texas are chronically overloaded. And what happens in Texas is that when they bid into the state's power market system, as they must, wind generators essentially now, when the lines are crowded, they bid negative prices. They will pay to get their power on the lines. They do so because the advantage they get from the production tax credit is sufficiently large that essentially they will be willing to pay to get power on the lines. There is a real question then about what the value of those credits are in the case where you have what would otherwise be economically irrational behavior.
But aren't there other energy supplies that are also getting discounted under that same model?
No, everybody in Texas pays what's called a nodal pricing system, and you pay prices that depend on the scarcity of transmission and generation. It's a very elaborate system that varies with the geography of the state. But the case of the wind units is pretty well documented, and unfortunately it's becoming more common.
Now, I represent Fort Worth. That's one of the cities that I also represent, which is home to Barnett Shale. Right. One of the a lot of natural gas drilling. Of course, the 1970s. People were saying basically what you're saying now, and that no, you're never going to get that gas. It's not going to happen. And of course, with technologies that were aided with intangible drilling costs and what have you, eventually made it to where that product could be brought to market. And so why don't you think we should make that same investment in wind? Because a lot of people sitting where you are right now back then were saying that it wasn't going to happen.
First thing I don't do, unlike most economists, is I try not to predict the future because I've been wrong too often. The difficulty that we have here is the question of what exactly did the interventions do in the case of shale oil? A technology got invented, and after that, the industry was able to stand on its feet. The wind industry is simply not standing on its feet at this point. And there's no reason to believe that continuing the production tax credit is going to necessarily change that situation. I can't predict this with certainty, but I think that there's not a very good analogy between shale and wind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.